Welcome to the Claire and Horatio Daily World Brief, available over at claireandhoratio.com. Today is Thursday, July 2026.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. We are jumping straight into the realities on the ground in Eastern Europe today because overnight into Thursday, the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv suffered a massive, just devastating drone and missile assault.
It was. And the sheer scale of this bombardment, it is difficult to overstate. Russian forces launched nearly 500 drones.
500.
Right, 500 drones and over 70 missiles. And this assault lasted for hours. Local authorities are currently reporting at least 25 people killed and 85 injured, including children.
That's awful.
It is. The destruction is heavily concentrated on the left bank of the Dnipro River. There was a 9-story apartment block there that was, well, it was essentially ripped open and just reduced to concrete rubble.
Look, you hear numbers like 500 drones and 70 missiles, but, walk me through the mechanics of an assault that large. How do you even coordinate something on that scale? And what's the strategic objective of mixing those specific weapons?
So it's a very calculated tactic designed specifically to exhaust defensive infrastructure.
Wow.
Drones are, relatively cheap and slow-moving. So by sending hundreds of them into a single airspace all at once, the attacking force basically forces the defending city to deploy its limited, highly expensive interceptor missiles.
Right, because you can't just let the drones hit their targets, you have to shoot them down.
Exactly. And once those local defense batteries are depleted, or even just while they're reloading, the much faster, heavier ballistic and cruise missiles are launched to strike the newly exposed targets.
And the human toll of this specific tactic is just severe, because last night over 52,000 people were forced underground to shelter in metro stations while the airspace was saturated.
Yeah, 52,000 people. And the destruction, it extended way beyond residential blocks. A Ukrainian Red Cross warehouse was completely destroyed in the strikes.
Oh.
We're looking at the loss of approximately $1.7 million in vital relief supplies.
Which is, that removes over 300,000 essential items from emergency response operations, precisely when a city of millions needs them most.
Right. Now, the official narrative coming from Moscow claims these strikes strictly targeted military plants, and they're framing it as retaliation for recent Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil refineries.
Okay, but there is a brutal paradox in claiming precise military retaliation while decimating kindergartens and civilian apartment blocks.
Yeah, the diplomatic fallout is already crystallizing around that exact assertion. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha called it fundamentally immoral to equate the actions of an aggressor with a country defending its own territory.
Right, you cannot reconcile the claim of targeted military objectives with a collapsed 9-story residential building. And this coordinated barrage, it occurred just as Ukraine is urgently pleading with its international allies for more of those air defense systems you mentioned earlier.
It did. And that reliance on international alliances actually brings us to the shifting posture of Ukraine's biggest military backer, which is the United States.
Yeah, because we are seeing a broader restructuring of international agreements there. Earlier this week, the U.S. declined to renew the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, the USMCA, in its current long-term form.
Right. Instead of long-term renewal, the agreement will now be reviewed on an annual basis.
So stop and explain the mechanism there for a second. The USMCA underpins, what, $2 trillion in highly integrated North American trade?
Roughly $2 trillion, yeah.
Right. So if I'm running a manufacturing business with, say, supply chains in Mexico and distribution in the U.S., how does an annual review process change my operational reality?
Well, it completely freezes your long-term capital expenditure. Look, if you're building a new automotive plant or a semiconductor facility, that is a 10-year investment horizon.
Sure.
You need absolute certainty that the tariffs and cross-border tax structures will remain stable. So by shrinking that review window to 12 months, the administration is injecting permanent structural uncertainty into the market.
Because you just don't know what the rules will be next year.
Exactly. Corporations are forced to hold cash in reserve rather than invest it because the entire trade rulebook could literally be rewritten next summer.
And that restructuring of trade, it really aligns with a much larger shift in U.S. governance under the current administration, specifically regarding this blending of executive power and private wealth.
It's a huge shift. Recent mandatory financial disclosures reveal that President Trump made at least $2.2 billion in 2025.
$2.2 billion. The historical norm for modern U.S. presidents has always been to divest from private business interests, right? Or utilize blind trusts.
Yes, the goal was always to eliminate any financial conflicts of interest while occupying the Oval Office. This disclosure, it shatters that precedent entirely.
And the specifics of the disclosure are striking. Of that $2.2 billion, $1.4 billion came directly from the cryptocurrency industry.
Yeah.
That includes royalties from Celebration coins, which are tied to a meme coin launched before his second term, and over $500 million from World Liberty Financial, which is a digital currency venture founded by his sons.
Which is where the policy friction comes in.
Exactly. Help me understand how this interacts with policy. What does it mean when a sitting president signs legislation supporting stablecoins while concurrently profiting from a digital currency business operated by his immediate family?
So to understand the ethical friction there, you really have to look at how stablecoins function. They're cryptocurrencies pegged to a stable asset, like the US dollar.
Right.
And they act as the primary on-ramp for the entire broader crypto ecosystem. So favorable legislation that normalizes and deregulates stablecoins massively increases the volume of money flowing into the crypto market.
I see.
And when that happens, the native tokens and platforms like those managed by World Liberty Financial, they skyrocket in valuation. So the policy action directly inflates the personal asset.
Okay, but I want to push back on the historical context here a bit. I hear watchdogs comparing this to the 1920s Teapot Dome scandal. But isn't there a fundamental difference?
Okay, yeah.
Well, Teapot Dome involved a cabinet secretary explicitly accepting bribes for oil leases. The White House's official response to this current disclosure firmly denies any conflicts of interest, right? They state all administrative actions are in the public's best interest, and they attribute the profits to independent fund management and broader market gains.
Sure, but presidential historians argue the difference is one of mechanism, not scale. Past controversies involved illicit back-channel bribery. What we're observing now is the overt legal accumulation of billions by a sitting executive through parallel private ventures.
Ventures that just happen to benefit from the industries the executive branch regulates.
Exactly. It's an architecture of concurrent profit that simply has no precedent in the modern era of American governance.
Well, it is striking to see the state restructuring global trade and redefining executive ethics. Because when you look at the private sector, the concentration of power and capital is operating on a totally different scale. Look at the historic SpaceX IPO that occurred in its recent market debut.
Oh, absolutely. The company raised $75 billion, reaching a staggering valuation of $2.1 trillion.
Which made Elon Musk the first person in history to hold a trillion-dollar fortune on paper.
Yes. But the disconnect between that $2.1 trillion valuation and the fundamental financial reality of the company is massive.
How so?
Well, last year, SpaceX generated $18.7 billion in revenue, but they operated at a $4.9 billion net loss due to capital investments in AI and space infrastructure.
Wait, let me make sure I understand this. A company hemorrhaging nearly $5 billion a year is valued at over $2 trillion.
Yep.
To put that into perspective, a traditional automaker like the Volkswagen Group generates more revenue in 2 weeks than SpaceX does an entire year, and they do it at a profit. Yet Volkswagen is valued roughly 40 times lower than SpaceX. Walk me through the mechanics of how the market justifies a multiple like that on a net loss.
Right, because it makes no sense if you look at it traditionally. The market is not pricing in current profitability. It's pricing in the perceived future monopoly of two critical infrastructures, which are space-based AI data centers and global satellite internet.
Oh.
The valuation is driven by the premise that if you control the only viable orbital delivery system, you eventually control the physical backbone of the future digital economy. It's speculative pricing, driven heavily by the founder's celebrity and this promise of total market capture.
For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clarinhoratio.com. It's the best way to keep up with these kinds of massive market mechanisms. But getting back to the specific risks of this IPO, there's a very direct civic concern here.
Yeah, the retail allocation.
Right. An unprecedented 30% of the shares, which amounts to $22.5 billion, was reserved for retail investors. I mean, are everyday people being invited to fund a loss-making AI and space monopoly just to hold the financial risk if the stratospheric hype eventually fades?
Well, the governance risks attached to those retail shares are severe. Because even after going public, SpaceX instituted a dual-class share structure.
Okay, meaning what for the average investor?
Meaning this ensures that Musk retains 82% of the total voting power. The public capital is absorbed, but the public voice is entirely neutralized.
Let me offer an analogy for that dual-class structure because it's wild. It's like buying a ticket to be on a commercial flight, but the airline informs you that one single passenger sitting in first class holds 82% of the voting power on who the pilot is, what route the plane takes, and whether or not it even lands.
That's exactly it.
You're simply financing the fuel, but you have zero say in the destination.
That analogy captures the voting dynamic perfectly, but the legal architecture goes even further.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the company actually restricts shareholders from filing class action lawsuits. So if you hold stock and suffer a grievance regarding how the company is managed, you cannot band together with other investors.
So what do?
You're forced individually into a specialized Texas business court or diverted into private arbitration. It's a system entirely designed to attract massive amounts of public capital while severely limiting investor rights in legal recourse.
Unbelievable. We see capital, advanced technology, and billionaires seamlessly transcending national borders and formulating plans to reach Mars. Yet physical borders here on Earth remain a site of intense, chaotic friction for everyday people.
The Q chaos.
Yes, the ongoing chaos caused by the new digital EU entry-exit system, known as the EES. Consider the concrete story of Anne Robinson and her 13-year-old son. They missed their flight from Rome back to the UK after waiting 90 minutes because the biometric kiosks were out of order, just sitting there unusable.
And she stated the experience was so stressful she will not return to Europe.
Right, and the failure is not isolated to Rome.
No, not at all. Berlin airport executives warned of 2-hour queues that are structurally unbearable for summer travel. Ryanair executives publicly criticized the rollout, literally calling families guinea pigs for a half-baked passport control system.
And what about the port of Dover?
At Dover, authorities are sitting on 84 unused biometric kiosks because the necessary technology, which is the responsibility of French authorities, simply cannot be activated.
Explain how this system was supposed to work. What exactly is the EES, and why is it failing so spectacularly at a basic bureaucratic level?
So the EES was designed to replace physical passport stamps for third country nationals entering the Schengen zone. It relies on a digital handshake. A traveler scans their face and fingerprints at a kiosk, and that data must instantly communicate with centralized European security databases.
So where is the bottleneck?
The gridlock is happening because incompatible subsystems across different member states are failing to communicate. The hardware in the airport cannot reliably talk to the servers in Brussels or Paris.
And when that API fails, the human being standing at the kiosk is locked in bureaucratic purgatory.
Exactly.
You have to juxtapose this gridlock trapping ordinary tourists at airports with a glaring failure in criminal enforcement. A recent BBC investigation found Twana Jamal, a convicted people smuggler known as Pasha, living openly in Leicestershire in the UK.
Yeah, this story is incredible.
He's driving a BMW without a license, operating 2 candy corner mini-marts, and seeking asylum under an alias.
And Jamal's background is extensively documented by European law enforcement. He was sentenced to 5 years in a French prison in 2016. Prosecutors detailed how he made approximately $134,000 a week by charging migrants between $6,000 and $6,700 a head to cross the channel.
A week, and despite this serious, documented criminal history, he easily entered the UK and applied for asylum. I mean, how does a state apparatus capable of mandating complex biometric tracking completely fail to share basic criminal data across the channel to catch a known smuggling kingpin?
It's a massive contradiction.
You have an individual standing outside a mini-mart in the UK, openly brushing off a French smuggling conviction, while a mother and son miss their flight in Rome because a digital fingerprint scanner cannot connect to the internet.
Right. It comes down to the collapse of international data sharing agreements. Immigration officers point out that prior to Brexit, checking criminal records from neighboring countries like France was an integrated process.
Right, it used to be seamless.
Now, the legal and technical bridges required to share that vital law enforcement data have been severed. The state is attempting to build digital walls for tourists, while the actual criminal data falls through massive administrative gaps.
Well, the inability of governments to manage basic border data points to a larger, more dangerous crisis in state capacity. Because this exact erosion of institutional capability is currently threatening our ability to understand and survive our rapidly changing environment.
Yeah, we're seeing this play out with the climate.
The economic toll of extreme weather is accelerating, and Germany serves as a prime example here. Heat waves pushing temperatures above 30 degrees Celsius are structurally damaging their economy.
And the threshold of 30 degrees Celsius, which is about 86 degrees Fahrenheit, is critical. Economists estimate this structural heat shock will cost the German economy $131 billion by 2030.
131 billion.
Yeah. For every degree above 30, labor productivity drops by 3%, and sick leave rises by up to 6%.
Break down the mechanics of that 3% productivity drop, because it's not just people feeling sluggish, is it? How does a temperature spike actually extract billions of dollars from a macroeconomy?
No, it manifests as hard physical limits. At sustained high temperatures, outdoor construction must legally halt to prevent heat stroke. Factories without modern climate control are forced to institute mandatory cooling breaks, which slows down assembly lines.
And what about transport?
Supply chains degrade because asphalt temperatures exceed transport safety limits, requiring heavy freight to be rerouted or delayed. The heat literally melts the physical and biological efficiency of the workforce.
And the tragic irony here is that precisely when we need robust, publicly funded data to manage these escalating physical threats, the U.S. government has proposed slashing $1.6 billion from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Yes. The consequences of defunding that public science infrastructure are immediate. Polling shows that 75% of U.S. scientists are considering looking abroad for work.
75%.
You're watching a generational brain drain from the federal science workforce.
But in response to the dismantling of that public science, former federal workers, many of whom were fired in 2025, have launched a citizen science pushback. They crowdfunded a site called climate.us to rescue and host crucial environmental data.
Which is an incredible effort.
It is, but what does it actually mean to rescue data? Isn't government climate data already public?
It is public, but it requires physical infrastructure to exist. We're talking about petabytes of data from satellite feeds, ocean buoys, and atmospheric sensors. If the government defunds the server farms and terminates the personnel managing the databases, that historical data goes dark.
I see.
So the Climate.us initiative is relying on voluntary expert vetting and small global donations to pay for private servers, ensuring the public retains access to scientifically rigorous climate information that the state will no longer maintain.
Well, amidst these institutional failures, there are still profound notes of human endeavor and scientific resilience. Like, in August, an international crew will launch the French-built Polar Station.
Whoa, this is a fascinating project.
It's a floating, futuristic laboratory designed to intentionally freeze into the Arctic pack ice. It's going to embark on an 8-month drift through the complete darkness and extreme cold of the polar night, just to study the Central Arctic Ocean's fragile biology before the sea ice melts forever.
It's a remarkable scientific mission, but it also reflects the core tension we're observing across all these stories today.
How so?
We are living in a moment defined by stark, opposing trajectories. Private individuals have the capacity to accumulate trillion-dollar fortunes and launch data centers into orbit. Yet the state apparatus struggles to protect civilian apartment blocks in Kyiv, manage a functional biometric checkpoint at an airport, or adequately fund the atmospheric science necessary to protect our own planet.
Right.
The capacity for monumental exploration and data collection exists, but it is increasingly reliant on private capital, philanthropy, and crowd-funded rescue missions rather than unified public policy.
You know, when vital public functions from international trade stability and diplomacy to climate data preservation and space exploration are increasingly offloaded to private monopolies or outright abandoned by the state, who ultimately holds the architects of our future accountable, you have to wonder what happens to the public interest when the public sector steps back. For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clarinarratio.com. Stay curious and stay morally awake.